Captain Lyra Moonwhisper stood at the edge of the great crystal platform that overlooked the forest canopy of Sylvandria. Her pointed ears twitched as she heard the soft footsteps of her warriors approaching from behind. The morning mist clung to the ancient trees below, and somewhere in that green expanse, her people were preparing for war. They had been preparing for months now, ever since the intelligence reports came in about the Zephyrian Empire. "Captain, the scouts have returned from the Outer Rim," said Megan Starleaf, her best archer. Megan's silver hair was braided with feathers, and her bow gleamed with magical enchantments. "The Zephyrians have taken 3 more systems. They're moving faster than we expected." Lyra nodded grimly. She had read the reports. The Zephyrians were not like the other enemies her people had faced over the centuries. They were advanced, organized, and ruthless. Their technology could punch through magical shields, and their ships moved through space like deadly silver fish. Worse yet, they seemed to want something from the elven worlds. The magical crystals that grew deep in Sylvandria's caves were said to be the most powerful in this sector of the galaxy. "Have Chloe Brightblade ready the war mages," Lyra commanded. "If they want our crystals, they'll have to fight through every tree and stream to get them." Chloe was already preparing when Lyra found her in the sacred grove. The war mage's hands glowed with blue fire as she practiced her combat spells. Around her, other elven warriors worked on their own magical abilities. Some created shields of pure energy, while others summoned elemental creatures from the forest itself. The elves had been perfecting these techniques for thousands of years. No enemy had ever successfully invaded their homeworld. "The ancestors guide us," Chloe said as Lyra approached. "But I sense something strange in the winds. There's another presence watching us. Not Zephyrian, but something else." Far across the galaxy, Commander Zara Vex was having similar thoughts aboard her flagship. The bridge of her vessel was a marvel of crystal and metal, with holographic displays, showing tactical information from across the Zephyrian fleet. Zara's blue skin seemed to shimmer in the artificial light, and her large eyes reflected the strategic calculations running through her mind. "Commander, our advanced scouts report that the elven forces are mobilizing," said Tara Nexus, her chief weapons engineer. Tara was younger than Zara, but equally dedicated to the honor of their empire. "They appear to be using some form of magical defense system we haven't encountered before. Primitive but potentially dangerous," added Vera Quantum, the fleet's tactical analyst. Her fingers danced over the holographic controls as she brought up images of the elven homeworld. "However, our projections show a 78% probability of successful conquest within 6 standard cycles." Zara studied the data with the calm precision that had made her one of the youngest commanders in Zephyrian history. The elves were clearly preparing for war, just as intelligence had predicted. What concerned her was not their magical abilities, which Zephyrian technology could counter, but something else entirely. For the past week, her sensors had been detecting strange energy signatures at the edge of their scanning range. Something was watching both the Zephyrian fleet and the elven homeworld. "There's a third party involved," Zara said finally. "Someone else is monitoring this situation." Her answer came sooner than expected. A transmission burst through both fleets' communication systems simultaneously, bypassing every security protocol that either side thought was unbreakable. The signal was clean, direct, and came from a source that neither the elves nor the Zephyrians had detected approaching. "This is Admiral Kate Morrison of the Human Space Coalition," the voice said. The image that appeared on screens across both fleets showed a woman with brown hair and calm eyes. She wore a simple uniform that looked almost primitive compared to Zephyrian technology or elven magical robes. "I'm speaking to both Captain Lyra Moonwhisper of Sylvandria and Commander Zara Vex of the Zephyrian Empire." Lyra nearly dropped her crystal communicator when the transmission reached her command post. The elves had never heard of humans before, and their appearance in the middle of an impending war was both surprising and suspicious. "We've been monitoring both of your civilizations for some time," Kate continued. "We know that you're preparing for conflict, and we believe this war is unnecessary. The Zephyrians seek magical crystals for their technology, while the elves wish to protect their homeworld. We propose a meeting to discuss alternatives to bloodshed." Zara's tactical computers immediately began analyzing the transmission source. What they found was disturbing. The humans had somehow positioned ships close enough to both fleets to transmit directly, yet neither side had detected them approaching. Either their stealth technology was beyond anything the Zephyrians had encountered, or they had capabilities that current sensors couldn't recognize. "I'm transmitting coordinates for a neutral meeting place," Kate said. "Haven's Rest Station, located between your territories. I suggest we meet within 48 hours before this situation escalates beyond diplomatic resolution." The transmission ended, leaving both commanders with more questions than answers. Lyra called an immediate council meeting with her senior warriors. Megan and Chloe joined her in the crystal chamber that served as the Elven command center. "I don't trust them," Megan said immediately. "How do we know these humans aren't working with the Zephyrians? This could be a trap." "The magical currents don't suggest deception," Chloe replied thoughtfully. "But they don't suggest honesty either. These humans are blank to my senses, as if they exist outside the natural flow of magic entirely." Lyra considered both opinions carefully. The elves had survived as long as they had by being cautious, but they had also survived by being adaptable. If there was even a small chance that war could be avoided, it was worth investigating. Meanwhile, Zara was conducting her own analysis with her senior staff. The Zephyrians prided themselves on understanding every variable in any situation, but the humans represented a complete unknown. "Their technology appears inferior to ours," Tara reported, "but somehow they achieved positions our sensors couldn't detect. This suggests either advanced stealth capabilities or tactical knowledge that our models don't account for." "Recommendation?" Zara asked. "Proceed with caution," Vera advised. "Meet with them, but maintain fleet readiness for immediate departure if needed." Both commanders ultimately reached the same conclusion. They would attend this meeting, but they would be prepared for anything. What neither expected was that the humans had been preparing for them much longer than they had been preparing for war. Kate Morrison closed the communication link and turned to her small crew aboard the human vessel. They had been watching both civilizations for months, studying their tactics, their cultures, and their technologies. The time had come to see if humans could prevent a war that would devastate both sides. "Think they'll come?" asked Amy Chen, her quiet communications officer. "They'll come," Kate replied confidently. "They're both too curious to stay away. The question is whether they'll listen to what we have to say." Haven's Rest Station floated in the void between star systems like a metallic flower frozen in space. The neutral facility had been built by an ancient race that no longer existed, leaving behind only this meeting place for species who needed to talk without the advantage going to either side. Captain Lyra Moonwhisper's ship approached from one direction, while Commander Zara Vex's vessel came from another. Between them, almost invisible against the stars, drifted the human ship. Lyra had brought her best warriors with her. Megan Starleaf checked her enchanted bow one more time, while Chloe Brightblade practiced small spells to keep her magical energy flowing smoothly. The elves wore their traditional forest armor, each piece carved with protective runes that had been passed down through generations. They looked ready for either diplomacy or war. "I still don't like this," Megan whispered as they prepared to dock. "These humans could be planning anything." "Stay alert, but don't start anything," Lyra warned. "We're here to learn, not to fight." The Zephyrian delegation was equally prepared. Zara's blue skin seemed to shimmer with nervous energy as she reviewed the tactical data one more time. Terra Nexus had insisted on bringing portable shield generators, while Vera Quantum carried a device that could analyze any technology they encountered. The Zephyrians believed in being ready for every possibility. "Sensors show the human ship has minimal armament," Tara reported. "Either they're very confident or very foolish." "Perhaps both," Zara replied. "Maintain recording protocols for everything we observe." The meeting room in Haven's Rest was simple and functional. A round table sat in the center with chairs that could adjust to accommodate different species. When all three delegations entered, the contrast between them was immediately obvious. The elves moved with natural grace, their magical auras creating small sparkles in the air around them. The Zephyrians walked with military precision, their advanced equipment humming with barely contained energy. The humans looked ordinary. Kate Morrison wore a simple gray uniform with no visible weapons or magical enhancement. Amy Chen carried, what appeared to be a basic communication device, while Lisa Park had only a small toolkit that looked like it belonged in a primitive workshop. Grace Miller seemed almost nervous, constantly looking around the room as if she expected trouble. "Thank you both for coming," Kate said as everyone took their seats. "I know this situation is unusual." Lyra studied the human admiral carefully. Without magical enhancement, she looked fragile compared to the elven warriors. "You claim to have been watching our civilizations. Why should we trust you?" "You shouldn't," Kate replied honestly. "Trust has to be earned. I'm hoping we can start that process today." Zara activated a small device that projected holographic tactical displays above the table. "Our analysis suggests that human technology is significantly behind both our civilizations. What makes you think you can contribute to resolving this conflict?" "We might not have your advantages," Kate admitted, "but we have experience with situations like this. Humans have been dealing with conflicts between different groups for our entire history. Sometimes the solution isn't about who has the better weapons or magic." "Then what is it about?" Chloe asked. Her magical senses told her that the humans were telling the truth, but there was something else about them that she couldn't identify. "It's about understanding what each side really wants and finding a way for everyone to get it," Kate explained. "The Zephyrians need magical crystals for their technology. The elves want to protect their home world. These goals don't have to be in conflict." "The crystals are sacred to our people," Lyra said firmly. "They cannot be harvested by outsiders." "And our empire requires those resources for expansion," Zara added. "There is no compromise possible." Kate smiled slightly. "That's what most people think at first. But what if we could demonstrate that there are other ways to approach this?" "Problem? Would you be willing to participate in a joint training exercise?" Both alien commanders looked skeptical. Vera Quantum's tactical computer was already calculating the human military capabilities and finding them wanting. Megan Starleaf could sense no magical power from any of the humans. "What kind of training?" Lyra asked. "A simple war game," Kate replied. "Each of our teams tries to capture an objective while the other two teams try to stop them. No real weapons, no permanent harm. Just a chance to see how our different approaches work together or against each other." "Acceptable," Zara said after a moment. "Our tactical superiority should be easily demonstrated in such an exercise. And our magical abilities will prove the wisdom of the forest folk," Lyra agreed. Kate nodded. "There's a moon system not far. From here, that would be perfect for this kind of exercise. Natural terrain, no strategic value to any of our civilizations. We could set up a controlled environment there." 3 days later, all 3 teams had established temporary bases on the designated moon. The terrain was challenging, with dense forests covering most of the surface and rocky hills providing natural obstacles. It was the kind of environment where both magical and technological advantages could be used effectively. Lyra's team had quickly adapted to the new forest. Megan found the best vantage points for her bow, while Chloe established magical wards around their base camp. The elves moved through the trees like they were born there, leaving almost no trace of their passage. "The humans have made camp in that valley," Megan reported after her first scouting mission. "Their defenses look primitive. Basic camouflage and simple barriers." "And the Zephyrians?" Lyra asked. "High-tech everything. Energy shields, sensor networks, automated defenses. Their base looks like a fortress." Zara's team had indeed built an impressive defensive position. Tara's shield generators created overlapping fields of protection, while Vera's sensors monitored everything within a kilometer radius. The Zephyrians were confident that their superior technology would give them victory in any engagement. "The Elven base shows significant magical energy signatures," Vera reported. "But our equipment is designed to counter such abilities. The human position appears tactically weak." "Almost suspiciously weak," Tara added. "Are they hiding something?" "Unknown," Zara replied. "But our projections show a 92% probability of successful mission completion regardless of their capabilities." The objective was simple: a beacon placed on the highest hill in the center of the contested area. Whichever team could reach it first and hold it for 1 hour would win the exercise. All 3 teams would start at the same time from their respective bases. When the exercise began, both the elves and Zephyrians moved according to their training. Lyra's team used stealth and forest magic to approach unseen through the trees. Zara's team advanced with tactical precision, their sensors sweeping for any sign of opposition. The human team simply vanished. For the first hour, neither alien team could find any trace of human movement. Megan's magical tracking abilities found nothing. Vera's advanced sensors detected no energy signatures. It was as if the humans had simply ceased to exist. "This is impossible," Chloe muttered as she tried another divination spell. "They can't just disappear without using magic." "Our equipment should detect any form of stealth technology," Tara insisted, checking her readings again. Both teams continued toward the objective, expecting to encounter each other as the only remaining competition. They were focused on preparing for a battle between magic and technology when Kate's voice suddenly spoke from speakers that appeared all around them. "Exercise complete," she announced calmly. "Human team has secured the objective." Both alien teams rushed to the hill to find Amy Chen sitting casually next to the beacon, which showed that it had been activated 47 minutes earlier. Lisa Park was making minor repairs to some equipment while Grace Miller monitored communications from both alien teams. "How?" Zara demanded, her tactical mind struggling to process what had happened. "Where were you?" Lyra asked, equally confused. Amy pointed to a small cave entrance that both teams had passed multiple times during their approach. "We went underground. These hills are full of natural tunnels. But our sensors would have detected movement in..." "Cave systems," Vera protested. "Not if we moved slowly and stayed away from the main passages," Lisa explained. "We used maintenance tunnels that were too small for your equipment to monitor effectively. And my magic should have sensed your presence," Chloe added. "Probably would have if we'd used any magic," Grace said with a slight smile. "But we didn't need to. We just walked quietly and stayed out of sight." Both alien teams stared at the humans in disbelief. They had been defeated not by superior technology or powerful magic, but by the simple tactic of taking a path that neither side had considered important enough to guard properly. Kate appeared at the entrance to the cave system. "Sometimes the best strategy is the one nobody expects because it seems too simple to work." The second day of training brought individual challenges that would test each species' specific strengths. Captain Lyra Moon Whisperer had requested a magical combat demonstration, confident that centuries of elven spellcasting traditions would easily overcome whatever primitive abilities the humans might possess. She stood in the center of the designated arena, her hands already glowing with mystical energy as she prepared to face her chosen opponent. "I will demonstrate the power of true magic," Lyra announced to the assembled groups. Her silver armor gleamed with protective enchantments, and the ancient staff in her hands hummed with accumulated power from generations of elven mages. Around the arena, magical crystals had been placed to amplify and focus mystical energies. Kate Morrison looked over her small team and pointed to Amy Chen. "Amy, you're up." Amy stood slowly, checking her basic equipment belt. She carried no weapons that anyone could see, wore simple combat fatigues with no magical enhancements, and showed no signs of mystical preparation. When she walked into the Soul arena, she looked like a child entering a contest against a master. "Are you certain about this choice?" Zara Vex asked Kate quietly. "My tactical analysis suggests your team member has zero probability of success against demonstrated magical abilities." "Amy will be fine," Kate replied with calm confidence. "But she has no magical aura at all," Chloe Brightblade whispered to Megan Starleaf. "I can't sense any mystical training or natural ability." "Maybe that's the point," Megan replied thoughtfully, remembering the cave tunnels from the previous day. The rules were simple. Each combatant would attempt to disable their opponent using whatever abilities they possessed. Magical shields would prevent serious injury, but the first person to be knocked down or forced to yield would lose the match. Lyra began immediately, weaving a complex spell that created 3 perfect illusions of herself. The false images moved independently around the arena, while she cast a second spell that made the ground beneath Amy's feet turn into quaking bog. Most opponents would be forced to focus on identifying the real attacker while struggling to maintain their footing. Amy looked around at the 4 identical elves surrounding her and did something completely unexpected. She started talking. Nice weather we're having, Amy said conversationally, as if she were chatting with a friend instead of fighting for her life. Much better than the rain we had yesterday. Lyra paused in her spell casting, confused by this response. In all her years of magical combat, no opponent had ever tried to start a casual conversation during battle. She resumed her casting, sending bolts of mystical fire toward Amy while maintaining her illusions. The food at the station is pretty good too, Amy continued, casually stepping aside as the fire bolts passed harmlessly by. Though I think the cook uses too much salt in the soup. Why are you talking? Lyra demanded, growing frustrated as her carefully planned attack sequence was disrupted by Amy's refusal to act like a proper opponent. Just making conversation, Amy replied, walking steadily forward through the magical bog as if it were solid ground. You seem tense. Fighting always goes better when you're relaxed. Lyra cast her most powerful binding spell, creating mystical chains that should have wrapped around Amy and held her motionless. Amy continued walking and talking, and the chains seemed to slide off her as if she were made of water. My grandmother always said that worry makes everything harder, Amy said, getting closer to Lyra with each step. She was probably right about that. How are you doing this? Lyra shouted, abandoning her illusions to focus all her power on a final devastating attack. She began casting the Sunfire Burst, a spell that would fill the entire arena with blinding light and concussive force. Doing what? Amy asked, reaching out and gently tapping Lyra on the shoulder just as the elf began the final word of her spell. The magical arena's safety systems activated, declaring Amy the winner. Lyra stood there in shock, her most powerful magic half-cast and useless. She had been defeated not by superior spell-casting or mystical knowledge, but by someone who had treated her deadliest attacks as background noise during a friendly chat. I don't understand, Lyra said weakly. You have no magical defenses. Those spells should have stopped you. They probably would have, if I'd been trying to fight them, Amy replied. But I wasn't fighting. I was just walking and talking. Your magic was trying to stop a warrior, but I wasn't being a warrior. Commander Zara Vex watched this exchange with growing concern. If human unpredictability could defeat magical combat this easily, what would happen when they faced Zephyrian technology? She was about to find out. The technological challenge took place in a sophisticated simulation chamber that recreated starship combat with perfect accuracy. Zara had chosen this test because space warfare was where Zephyrian superiority was most absolute. Her people had been perfecting space combat for millennia, and their tactical computers could calculate optimal strategies faster than most species could think. I will pilot the Zephyrian assault craft, Zara announced, as she took her position at the advanced control station. The interface responded to her thoughts as much as her physical movements, and tactical data flowed directly into her enhanced consciousness. Who will represent the humans? Kate looked at Lisa Park, who was quietly examining the human simulation pod with obvious interest. Lisa, show them how we fly. Lisa nodded and climbed into what appeared to be a much simpler control system, where Zara's station had holographic displays showing every possible tactical variable. Lisa's controls looked like they belonged on an antique aircraft. Basic screens, physical switches, and manual controls replaced the advanced neural interfaces that Zephyrian pilots required. The simulation will pit identical spacecraft against each other in open space combat, Zara explained. Victory conditions are simple: disable or destroy the opponent's vessel. The battle began with Zara implementing a perfectly calculated attack pattern. Her computer had analyzed every possible human response and determined the optimal strategy for quick victory. She approached at precisely the right angle, fired at exactly the correct moment, and executed evasive maneuvers that textbook examples had proven to be unbeatable. Lisa's ship didn't follow any recognizable pattern at all. Where Zara's tactical computer predicted Lisa would turn left, she went up. When algorithms suggested she would increase speed, she slowed down. When battle doctrine demanded she return fire, she simply flew in a lazy circle. What is she doing? Terranexus asked, watching the displays in confusion. None of those maneuvers serve any tactical purpose. Computer error? Vera Quantum suggested, but her analysis showed that Lisa's ship was responding perfectly to her commands. Zara found herself in the strange position of fighting an opponent who seemed to be ignoring everything she did. Every time her systems calculated the optimal counter to Lisa's position, Lisa would do something that made the previous calculation useless. It was like trying to play chess against someone who moved pieces randomly. Worse yet, Lisa's random movements were somehow keeping her ship out of Zara's weapons range. Not through superior piloting or tactical genius, but because she kept going places that Zara's computer said no rational pilot would ever go. "This is impossible," Zara muttered, trying a new approach. She programmed her systems to respond to Lisa's movements in real time, instead of trying to predict them. But Lisa seemed to change her flying style the moment Zara adapted to it. The battle continued for 20 minutes before Lisa's ship suddenly appeared directly behind Zara's vessel and calmly fired a single shot that disabled her engines. "How?" Zara demanded, as the simulation ended. "Your tactics made no sense. You violated every principle of space combat." "That's kind of the point," Lisa explained as she climbed out of her control pod. "If I follow the rules, then your computer can figure out what I'm going to do next. But if I don't follow any rules, it can't predict anything." "But how do you know what to do if you're not following proper tactics?" "I just do whatever feels right at the moment," Lisa said with a shrug. "Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it usually confuses the other guy enough to give me an advantage." Grace Miller had been watching both demonstrations with quiet interest. As the communications officer, she had been studying how both alien species approached information security. Now it was her turn to show what humans could do with that knowledge. "I'd like to try something," Grace said quietly. "If that's okay." She walked over to a standard information terminal that was connected to both the Elven Magical Network and the Zephyrian Quantum Communication System. Both networks were protected by their respective species' most advanced security measures. "These systems are completely secure," Vera assured everyone. "Quantum encryption and magical wards make unauthorized access impossible." Grace sat down at the terminal and began typing slowly on the physical keyboard. She didn't use any special equipment or magical abilities. She just started asking the computer questions. "Hello?" she typed. "I'm trying to find some information about yesterday's training exercise. Can you help me?" The system responded with a standard security prompt asking for identification codes. "I don't have those codes," Grace typed back. "Is there another way I can access the information? Maybe through a different system?" For the next 10 minutes, Grace continued this conversation with the computer systems as if they were people she was asking for help. She didn't try to break through security or bypass protection. She just kept asking polite questions and following the suggestions that the automated systems gave her. Somehow, this approach worked. The computers, designed to resist sophisticated attacks, had no defense against someone who simply asked nicely for help and followed their own guidance for alternative access routes. "System breach detected," Vera's device announced after Grace had been working for 15 minutes. Unauthorized access to classified training data. Grace had successfully accessed both the Elven magical records and the Zephyrian tactical database using nothing more than persistence and politeness. "The security protocols should have prevented this," Chloe said in amazement. "They would have if I'd been trying to break in," Grace explained. "But I wasn't breaking in. I was just asking for help. The systems are designed to be helpful to authorized users, so I let them help me find authorization." Both Lyra and Zara stared at the humans with new understanding. They weren't winning through superior abilities or advanced technology. They were winning by refusing to play the game the way everyone expected it to be played. The emergency alarms shattered the peaceful atmosphere of Haven's rest station, just as Captain Lyra Moonwhisper was beginning to understand how humans thought. Red lights flashed through the corridors, while automated systems announced the same terrifying message in 3 languages. "Multiple hostile contacts detected. All stations to battle readiness." Admiral Kate Morrison reached the communication center first, followed closely by Commander Zara Vex and Lyra. The main display showed a tactical map that made everyone's blood run cold. Dozens of dark shapes were moving through space toward all 3 homeworlds simultaneously, their approach vectors calculated with deadly precision. "What are those ships?" Zara demanded, her tactical training immediately analyzing the threat. "I don't recognize the configuration." "Neither do I," Lyra added, reaching out with her magical senses to try to understand what they were facing. What she felt made her step backward in shock. There's something wrong with them. They feel empty, but not dead, like holes in the fabric of reality itself. Kate's face had gone pale as she studied the readings. We know what they are. We hope they were extinct. She turned to face both alien commanders with grim determination. These are devourers. They consume energy to grow stronger. Any energy. Magical, technological, biological, everything. The first reports came in within minutes. The lead devourer ships had reached the outer defense stations of all three civilizations, and the results were catastrophic. Elven magical barriers that had protected their people for centuries simply vanished when the dark ships touched them. Zephyrian energy weapons made the attacking vessels stronger instead of damaging them. This is impossible, Terra Nexus reported from her ship's communications center. Our most powerful weapons are feeding them. Every shot we fire makes them bigger. The magical defenses are worse than useless, Megan Starleaf added through her emergency transmission. When we cast protective spells, the creatures absorb the energy and use it to break through our remaining shields. Kate listened to the reports with growing alarm. Everything was happening exactly as her species' ancient records had predicted. The Devourers had waited until they found civilizations advanced enough to provide substantial energy sources, then struck when those civilizations were gathered together. How do we fight something that grows stronger from our attacks? Lyra asked, her voice tight with controlled fear. We don't fight them the way they expect, Kate replied. But this is going to require trust. Complete trust between all three of our species. Admiral Kate Morrison's plan sounded insane to both alien commanders. She proposed combining their forces in ways that violated every principle of military doctrine that either species had ever developed. Elven magic would be directed by human, tactical decisions without the elves understanding the purpose. Zephyrian technology would be controlled by human operators using methods that made no logical sense. You're asking us to give up command of our own forces, Zara protested. No military organization can function without proper chain of command and tactical coordination. That's exactly the problem, Kate explained. Military organizations function in predictable ways. The Devourers adapt to predictable patterns. We need to be unpredictable enough that they can't absorb and counter our abilities before we can use them effectively. The first joint mission was a desperate attempt to retake a Zephyrian research station that had been captured in the initial attack. The station contained critical information about Devourer weaknesses that had been discovered during humanity's first encounter with them centuries earlier. Lyra found herself taking orders from Amy Chen, who had no magical training and couldn't even sense mystical energy. Amy's instructions made no sense from a magical perspective, but Lyra had seen what human unpredictability could accomplish. I need you to cast a fear spell on our own ship, Amy said calmly as their combined fleet approached the captured station. A fear spell on ourselves? Lyra repeated, certain she had misunderstood. That would make our crews panic and flee. Exactly, Amy replied. Make it look like we're running away in terror. Meanwhile, Zara was receiving equally bizarre orders from Grace Miller. The human communications officer wanted her to broadcast surrender messages on all frequencies while powering down their weapon systems. This violates every tactical principle, Vera Quantum protested. We'll be defenseless. That's what we want them to think, Grace explained. The Devourers expect either magical attack or technological resistance. They're not prepared for enemies who appear to be giving up. The combined fleet approached the research station, broadcasting panic and surrender while apparently fleeing in disarray. The Devourer ships, sensing easy prey, moved in to absorb the energy from the retreating vessels. What they found instead was a carefully coordinated assault that struck from directions they hadn't anticipated. Lisa Park had programmed the Zephyrian weapons to fire in patterns that looked like system malfunctions, but actually created precisely targeted weak points in the Devourer defenses. Chloe Brightblade cast spells that appeared to be failing catastrophically, but actually channeled magical energy through pathways the creatures couldn't detect or absorb. It's working, Megan reported from her position coordinating Elven scouts. The Devourers are trying to adapt to our magical signatures, but they keep changing too fast for their absorption systems to lock on. The key to the strategy was that humans kept changing the rules faster than the Devourers could learn them. Every time the creatures began to understand how the Allied forces were operating, Amy or Grace or Lisa would give new orders that transformed the entire approach. When the Devourers adapted to absorb scattered magical energy, Lyra was ordered to concentrate all her power into a single massive spell that did nothing but create pretty lights. While the creatures focused on absorbing this obvious magical attack, Zara's ship struck from completely different angles, using weapons that the Devourers hadn't detected because they were disguised as normal space debris. "They're not fighting us," Tara observed with growing amazement. "They're trying to understand us, but every time they figure out part of our strategy, it changes into something completely different." The research station was retaken after 6 hours of the strangest space battle any of them had ever experienced. The human strategy had worked, but at a cost. The Devourers had learned from the encounter and were already adapting their tactics for the next engagement. "This was just the first test," Kate warned as they reviewed the battle data. "The real challenge is coming. Our home worlds are still under attack, and the Devourers are getting smarter." The information recovered from the research station confirmed Kate's worst fears. The Devourer fleet was being directed by something called the Prime Hunger, an ancient entity that had been consuming entire civilizations for millions of years. Each victory made it more intelligent and more capable. "It's not just absorbing our energy," Lisa realized as she studied the technical data. "It's absorbing our knowledge. Every time we use magic or technology against it, the Prime Hunger learns how those systems work." "Then how do we fight something that becomes smarter every time we engage it?" Lyra asked. "We don't let it learn," Grace suggested quietly. "We use tactics that can't be learned because they don't follow any system at all." Zara's tactical computers were already calculating the impossibility of the task ahead. "You're proposing to coordinate 3 different military forces using no consistent strategy against an enemy that adapts to any pattern we establish. The computational requirements alone." "Don't compute it," Amy interrupted. "Just do it. One decision at a time, one moment at a time. No plans, no patterns, no predictable responses. That's not how wars are fought," Zara protested. "Maybe not," Kate acknowledged. "But it's how this war is going to be won. If we're going to save all 3 of our worlds, we need to trust each other completely and fight like humans. Both alien..." Commanders looked at each other across the tactical display. Everything they had learned about warfare, everything their civilizations had taught them about military strategy, said that Kate's approach was impossible. But they had also seen what human unpredictability could accomplish against supposedly superior opponents. "What do you need us to do?" Lyra asked finally. "Follow orders that won't make sense," Kate replied honestly. "Trust decisions that seem wrong, and be ready to change everything at a moment's notice." The real war was about to begin, and none of them knew if they would survive it. The final battle began when the massive Devourer fleet, led by the Prime Hunger itself, arrived at Earth's solar system. The ancient entity had calculated that humanity was the strategic center of the 3-species alliance, and by consuming human unpredictability, it could finally become truly unstoppable. Captain Lyra Moonwhisper and Commander Zara Vex watched from their respective flagships as the dark vessels filled space around the small blue world. "Energy readings are off our measurement scales," Terra Nexus reported, her voice tight with fear. "That thing is larger than our biggest space stations." "And it feels wrong," Chloe Brightblade added through the magical communication network. "Like it's sucking the life out of space itself." Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of her command ship, looking out at the approaching darkness with calm determination. Around her, Amy Chen, Lisa Park, and Grace Miller were making final preparations for a battle that would either save 3 civilizations or destroy them all. "This is it," Kate announced to the combined fleets. "Everything we've learned, everything we've practiced, comes down to the next few hours. Remember, there is no plan, no strategy, no predictable patterns. We respond to each moment as it comes." The Prime Hunger's voice echoed across all communication channels, speaking in a tone that seemed to drain hope from anyone who heard it. "I have studied your species extensively during our previous encounters. Elven magic follows ancient patterns that I have already absorbed. Zephyrian technology operates on principles I have long since mastered. And human chaos, while initially confusing, will soon be understood and consumed." "It thinks it knows us," Amy observed quietly. "That's good. Overconfidence is a weakness we can use." The battle began with the Devourers doing exactly what everyone expected. They moved to absorb magical energy from the elven ships, while simultaneously draining power from Zephyrian technology. Their tactics were perfect, based on millions of years of experience consuming other civilizations. What they found instead was something that made no sense at all. Lyra was casting spells that did absolutely nothing useful. On Amy's orders, she created magical effects that served no tactical purpose and followed no logical pattern. Flowers bloomed in space around the elven ships. Illusory butterflies danced between laser beams. Musical notes made of pure magic played. Symphonies that could be heard across the vacuum. "What are you doing?" the Prime Hunger demanded, its voice betraying confusion for the first time in eons. "These magical effects serve no combat function." "Exactly," Amy replied cheerfully through the open communication channel. "Pretty, aren't they?" Meanwhile, Zara's ships were behaving just as strangely. Following Grace's guidance, they were using their advanced weapons to create elaborate light shows and geometric patterns in space. Deadly energy beams spelled out poetry in ancient Zephyrian script. Tactical missiles were programmed to fly in, formation like dancing birds. "Your technology is being wasted on meaningless displays," the Prime Hunger observed, trying to understand why advanced weapons were being used for art instead of warfare. "Art is never meaningless," Lisa replied as she programmed another squadron of ships to create a massive holographic sculpture using their engine trails. The Devourers attempted to absorb these strange energies, but found that decorative magic and artistic technology provided no useful knowledge or power. Worse yet, the displays were so random and purposeless that there was nothing for the Prime Hunger to learn from them. "This is not warfare," the ancient entity declared, growing frustrated, with opponents who refused to fight properly. "Who said we were fighting?" Kate asked innocently. "We're having a party. You're welcome to join us if you want." The real attack came from directions the Devourers never expected. While the Prime Hunger focused on the meaningless magical and technological displays, Megan Starleaf was using her elven archery skills to guide simple kinetic weapons with impossible precision. Her arrows carried no magical enhancement and used no advanced technology, just perfect aim directed by centuries of practice. These purely physical attacks bypassed the Devourers' energy absorption systems entirely. The creatures had become so focused on consuming magical and technological power that they had forgotten to defend against basic physics. Vera Quantum had worked with Lisa to develop new tactical algorithms based on human chaos theory rather than logical prediction. These systems created battle plans that changed randomly every few seconds, making it impossible for the Devourers to adapt to any consistent strategy. "Impossible!" the Prime Hunger snarled as its smaller vessels began taking damage from attacks it couldn't absorb or predict. "Combat must follow logical patterns. Victory must be based on superior capabilities." "Says who?" Amy asked as she directed Chloe to cast a spell that made all the human ships appear to be giant floating flowers. "We never read that rule book." The turning point came when the three species began working together in ways that none of them had thought possible. Terras, engineering skills combined with elven magic to create hybrid weapons that operated on principles the Devourers couldn't understand. These devices worked not because they were logical, but because they were impossible. Grace coordinated communications between all three fleets, using a system that translated not just languages, but entire ways of thinking. Elven intuition guided. Zephyrian precision guided human improvisation in a continuous cycle that created tactical solutions none of the species could have developed alone. "You cannot defeat me," the Prime Hunger declared, beginning to sound desperate. "I am the culmination of millions of years of absorbed knowledge and consumed civilizations." "That's your problem right there," Grace replied. "You're trying to use old knowledge to understand something completely new." The final assault involved every ship in the combined fleet doing something different, something unexpected, something that had never been tried before. Lyra cast a spell that turned the entire battlefield into a giant musical instrument, with each ship's movement creating harmonious sounds. Zara programmed her weapons to fire in rhythm with the music. The human ships danced through space like they were performing ballet. The Prime Hunger, faced with an enemy that refused to follow any rules it could understand, began making mistakes for the first time in its ancient existence. It tried to adapt to the musical warfare but couldn't find any consistent pattern to absorb. It attempted to counter the dancing ships but couldn't predict movements based on artistic expression rather than tactical necessity. This is not how war works, the entity insisted, its massive form beginning to show damage from attacks it couldn't comprehend. War doesn't work, Kate replied as she coordinated the final phase of the battle. That's why we're not fighting a war. We're creating something new. The end came not with a massive explosion or dramatic final battle, but with something much stranger. The combined fleet surrounded the Prime Hunger and began creating the most beautiful and chaotic display of light, music, and movement that any of them had ever imagined. Magical energy, advanced technology, and human creativity combined into something that was part celebration, part art project, and part completely new form of existence. The Prime Hunger, designed to consume and learn from everything it encountered, tried to absorb this new creation and simply couldn't process it. The entity that had conquered entire galaxies was defeated by beauty, randomness, and the refusal of 3 species to limit themselves to what was supposed to be possible. In its final moments, the Prime Hunger spoke with what might have been wonder instead of rage. "I do not understand what you have created." "Neither do we," Kate admitted. "That's what makes it beautiful." The Devourer fleet dissolved into harmless energy that dispersed across the solar system, adding new colors to Earth's auroras and strange new properties to the magical crystals of Sylvandria. The threat that had consumed civilizations for millions of years was gone, not destroyed, but transformed into something that could create instead of consume. In the aftermath, representatives from all 3 species met again on Haven's rest station. The alliance that had begun with mutual suspicion had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a partnership based not on common enemies or shared interests, but on the recognition that different ways of thinking could create possibilities none of them had imagined alone. "So what happens now?" Lyra asked, as she watched human children play with elven magic while Zephyrian scientists studied the impossible physics of human improvisation. "Now we see what else is possible," Kate replied. "We've proven that the galaxy doesn't have to follow the old rules. Maybe it's time to write some new ones." Amy was already teaching young elves that magic worked best when you didn't worry too much about doing it correctly. Lisa was helping Zephyrian engineers design ships that shouldn't work but did anyway. Grace was developing new communication, protocols that translated not just words but entire concepts between species who thought in completely different ways. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, but it was also full of new possibilities. Other civilizations had begun studying the 3 species alliance, trying to understand how they had defeated an enemy that had seemed invincible. Most of them were still looking for a system to analyze, a pattern to copy, a strategy to replicate. They wouldn't find one, because there wasn't one to find. The Alliance had succeeded not by being better than their enemies, but by refusing to accept that there were limits to what could be accomplished when different minds worked together without fear of being wrong. And in the end, that turned out to be the most human thing of all.